Hey, so I don't know what part, when this is actually gonna even be in this video, because basically, I want to read Knightfall, which is a Batman arc. It's a Batman comic arc called Knightfall, and someone gave me a comic, in the middle of it actually, a few years back, like 2022 probably, maybe 2023, and I really, really liked it. But that was in the middle of it, and I want to read all of Knightfall, so when I looked it up, I discovered that there is a whole prelude that you have to read before you can read Knightfall. Okay? So I decided to film a vlog of me reading the comics in that prelude. And what happened? Well, I'll tell you in a minute because this will be the first part of that vlog. Okay, hey, so I just read right now Batman Sword of Azrael #1, which is the first comic in all of this prelude to Nightfall. It's also part of its own four issue comic run, and I have to say I did not like it. This comic is basically telling us the backstory of a vigilante called Azrael. It's not clear yet. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a villain, but he is a vigilante. Like, if you look at it realistically, he's just as much as a vigilante as Batman. Um, but yeah, I so there were a few things I didn't like. The two main things were it had a trope of hypnotism, but I could have put that aside. It had a few tropes I didn't like. The trope of hypnotism, trope of a hidden knight's order, stuff like that. But the main thing I did not like was the way it was written. Uh, it was over explaining in some places, but besides that, the thing that really that just made me not like it at all was it just would had no real it didn't understand how to use the panels. Like, it would be in one panel and then it would transfer, like, the speech in that panel would transfer to another panel as and you it was so hard to understand what was going on because of that. And listen, I've read comics that have done that well. This comic just did not do it well. I kept having to go back and read and figure out because stuff was just so much all over the place. So yeah, I did not like Batman Sword of Azrael #1. But I have 3 more comics of that to get over with, and then hopefully I'll like the other comics. Okay, listen, it is March 8th, or March 7th, no, March 6th. I read Volume 2 of Sword of Azrael, and I hated it. Literally, like, you cannot tell who's speaking. They will change the type of speech bubbles, the color of speech bubbles, and and where it's directed, and then you'll not to who is directed, because a lot of the times the panels of the speech bubbles won't even be the panels of the speech bubbles won't even be in the same panel as the person is talking until, like, the last sentence they say. And it will change color. It will change whether it's pointing right or left. It will change the type, whether it's square or round or fluffy or cloud-like. And it is so, like, this is one of the worst. I don't even care about the plot or anything else anymore because the way the comic is set up is so bad. Okay, it's March 9th. And yesterday I read Batman Sword of Azrael 3. Today I have to read Batman Sword of Azrael 4, and let me say how happy I am that I'm going to be done with this. It is frustrating how hard it is to read as well, because I feel like, oh, I don't have anything to say about the plot or anything because I'm struggling so much to tell who's speaking and what's going on at all. I mean, it is a bit easier to tell what's going on now, but maybe because I got a little used to it, or maybe the panels literally were just a little clearer. I do believe the panels were a little clearer at the end of this comic, and by a little, that still does not mean they were clear at all, okay? I hate this comic series. I hate Batman Sword of Azrael. But I just have one more to read, and then I can get to hopefully better stuff. Um, it is nice to see Alfred, though. I wish I could actually understand what he was doing and didn't have to struggle to figure out exactly what he's doing and if it's him that's talking, though. I do like a character who I cannot say who he is because it's spoilers, but he is he's just thrust into situations, and he is kind of your everyman character. And in the beginning, the first two stuff, he was really, really boring, but he did get a little more interested in issue 3. Oh, I was just about to go and read issue 4, and then I saw the first page. I remembered one of the things that most annoyed me about the series and really culminated in how much it annoyed me in issue 3, which is that there are only square comic panels in second person, that it's just one of the guys in the comics telling another guy in the comic what happened. And it just so obvious that whoever put this comic together couldn't figure out how to show us what was happening, because and it's not always the same guy, right? Like one time it will be guy, and even in the same issue it will switch. One time it will be guy A telling guy B, another time it will be guy B telling guy C, or even guy B telling guy A. And okay, maybe yeah, not in the same issue, but in different issues, absolutely. Yeah. And it's just so obvious that whoever put, like I'm saying, whoever put the comic together couldn't figure out how to show us, so they just had to tell us. I just finished, it's 9:30, and I just finished Batman Sword of Azrael number 4, which is, yay, finally, I'm done with that series. I'm not sure if the writing was genuinely better, or if it was just that, how do you say it? Or if it was just that the oh right, that it was much more obvious in this issue who was talking, which did make me realize, like, I was wondering if it's just the panels or if it's also the drawings. And there was one like just like the speech bubbles, sorry, not the panels, the speech bubbles, or also the panels and how they're set up. And it did make me realize that it was also the panels, because the worst one in this issue, yeah, was you had a huge head of one of the characters, and then you had Alfred's tiny body next to him, and there was no reason for them. Okay? I'm sorry, it was bad setup of a panel. It was a bad setup of a panel. But I do think it was also better writing, because we had, in the last issue, in issue number 3, we had a tiny bit of Alfred's humor. In this one, we got a lot of Bruce's humor, which was very fun. I really like his snarky humor. He and Alfred actually share quite a bit of humor. But yeah, I really liked getting Bruce's snarky humor. There were some stuff that was like interesting to think about in character stuff, especially about this new character. And then it just ended. And the ending was all like, wrap everything up pretty in a bow with regards to what was happening with this character. And it was like, we had only started talking about it basically in this issue. Like it was referred to a bit in issues 2 and 3, but it was really only started talking about it in this issue. And then they all wrap it up with a bow. This this comic run, Batman Sword of Azrael, 1992 to 93, not well done at all, for many reasons. As I mentioned, the drawings, the speech bubbles, uh, the wrap up, the plot itself was okay, but like this whole comic was just, I it had potential to be better, obviously. Like I don't know, I don't think it would ever be like my favorite comic, because the plot specifically for me is not that interesting, even if it was done the best ever. But just the way it was done was just so bad. But anyways, let's leave that alone. Tomorrow, hopefully with God's help, I will read Batman Vengeance of Bane issue 1. Okay, so I just read Batman Vengeance of Bane, and oh my god, it was a breath of fresh air after that horrible Sword of Azrael run. So this is basically, there's this Batman villain called Bane, and this is basically his origin story. Did I have issues with it? Yes. I There was some stuff in his origin story that was just like, okay, you gotta go with it. Very annoying, but you gotta go with it. Spiritual stuff mainly. Um, and there was one part where I did have to go back and look at the panels again to understand what was happening. But other than that, it was good. Like, even besides the fact that it was better than Sword of Azrael, because anything would be better than Sword of Azrael. But like at the same time, I'm like, how much am I saying it's good because it's good, or am I saying it's good because I'm like, I just have Sword of Azrael in my mind, and like I'm just like, and like the things I want to say are good are just basic stuff that should be in comics that Sword of Azrael didn't have. Like, it's basically color coded so you can tell who everyone is. Like, the characters are very distinct. You know what I mean? Even it's not, but it's not overly color coded. It's like not the Transformers or even Avatar, but the characters are actually distinct, and you can tell who is who and who's doing what. You know what I mean? Um, the plot was the plot was a bit much. Like, this was a like one of those special stuff where it's 64 pages, and I do feel like it should have been cut. Like, we should have gotten the origin story of Bane and then we should have gotten him confronting Batman for the first time, because it was all together in this comic, and it felt like too much. They were doing too much. But you know what, another thing that I'm comparing to Sword of Azrael, that where Sword of Azrael kept being told in like boxes of like, you did this and you did this. They did something kind of similar to this, where there was this guy telling the story about Bane, so he's telling it in boxes, but it was actually done well, you know, and like it just shows that it can be done well. And Sword of Azrael was just terrible in like every way possible. And some of this review of Batman Vengeance of Bane issue 1 has become just more complaining about how terrible the Sword of Azrael run was. The Sword of Azrael 1993-1994 run. I think it's 1993-1994. Yeah. Or it could be 1992 to 1993. Anyways, pretty sure it's 1993 to 1994. Anyways, so that's what I wanted to say. Bane's origin story really reminded me of Edmond Dante's origin story. So I'm wondering if like they were inspired on purpose, and they were inspired by accident, like they didn't, like it was just like in their head and they didn't know. It has to be on purpose, right? Like, if you know it has to be on purpose. Like, even if they just thought of it in the beginning and then were like, by the time they were writing it, the way they were writing it, it had to be on purpose, because it just followed so things from Count of Monte Cristo and Edmond's imprisonment so perfectly. It had to be on purpose. Which, personally, as a big Count of Monte Cristo fan and Edmond Dantès fan, I really enjoyed. That was absolutely probably my favorite part of the comic. Okay, if you remember way back in the beginning of this video, hopefully with God's help, I've read a few more comics since then, but I told you that something happened. And that something is that I believe that the first comic you need to read in the prelude is Batman number 484. Because of course, right? Um, However, that is not so. It turns out that the first comic you need to read in the prelude is Batman Sword of Azrael number 1, followed by Batman Sword of Azrael 2, 3, and 4, followed by Batman Some Vengeance of Bane number 1, and only then do you get to Batman number 484. However, it is now February. It's now March 4th, and I just read Batman 484 because I didn't realize until after reading Batman 484 that I was supposed to read those 5 comics first. So this is going to be my review of Batman number 484, and you kind of have to remember that my view on this comic might have been changed if I had read those 5 comics first, but it is what it is. And overall, it was understandable, and I don't necessarily think that those 5 comics had any, I mean, I don't know, I haven't read them yet, but I don't necessarily think that they had anything to add in the stuff that I was missing in the comics. Like, there were a few people who came up in this comic who I didn't really know who they were, but I think the thing about comics is, especially, this is published in the 1990s, it was published in 1992, and I think especially back then, you were still assuming that that people are going to come into these comics and not know everything. So it does kind of explain to you who these people are, even without you knowing. Like, I still felt I was missing. I'm not sure exactly who Vicky is. I kind of know because I read a Batman book based on the Batman movie, but I wasn't. But there was obviously past relationship between her and Bruce Wayne that I was not clear on. I've never heard of Lucius Fox before. And I'm still not totally sure what he does. It seems like he's kind of like a Jim Gordon type character, but no, it seems like he's the CEO of Batman's companies. So yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense with what happened in the comic. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he's the CEO of Batman's companies or the Wayne Foundation, something like that. And but overall, I didn't understand this comic. And now look, I would say this is a horror comic, also because of the plot. But listen, this plot and the backstory for the villain could have been camp. Like the backstory for this villain is absurd. Like when you actually think about it, it's absurd. It's hilarious. Uh, but the way the comic was drawn, like specifically the way the comic was drawn, uh, really made you feel like the horror of it. Without, I would say it didn't. There was only like one panel where it actually did go into gore. But despite that, the way it was drawn in those panels with all of the overlapping pictures, the colors chosen, I would also say, very bright and yet somehow dull, maybe like undersaturated but still bright colors on dark backgrounds, really made you feel the horror of it. And listen, I was definitely shivering. I was definitely shivering in my body. So that, which means I did enjoy it. I think, however, my favorite character in this comic was Tim Drake. And look, I've never finished a Batman comic. I tried to read the Robin comics that focused on Damian, could not get through them. They had too much gore for me, which is funny because they're much more lighthearted than this comic. Wait, I have read a Batman comic. Sorry. Um, I read. Where is it? I read Batman, the Dark Knight Returns series, which I absolutely loved, but Robin wasn't really a main character in there. I don't even remember if he appears. I'm pretty sure he does, but he's not like, but like it's kind of like the Robins in there aren't really their own person. They're just a vehicle for the story and for Batman. But here, Tim Drake definitely got his chance to shine with a very, very small chance. Yeah, Dark Knight Returns, there are a few Robins, but like I said, they're a vehicle for Batman to have stuff happen. Um, but back to Batman number 484. Tim Drake does get a chance to shine, a very, very small chance. Again, he is again mostly an excuse for Batman to tell us who this villain is, because of course he's like, well, who is this villain? I've never heard of him, right? So he is mostly an excuse for Batman to tell us this guy's backstory, but he does add some much needed humor, and I like him already from that. Probably just because you need a bit of lightheartedness in the midst of that horror, but I'm not actually a person who really likes people. Likes people. People, yes. Characters, well, actually, people not always either. Anyways, back characters. I'm not necessarily a person who likes characters, the comedy relief characters in horror, actually. So I don't know if it's with Tim Drake's specific type of comedy, or it's the fact that I'm generally obviously reading prose works and not comic works, and there is something that's more in your face. There's always going to be something that's more in your face about pictures, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. So that might also make me need more comedy or appreciate the comedy more. Appreciate, I think, is a better way to put it. We'll see. But as of right now, it's going to be a while because I have to read those 5 comics first. What I did not like about this comic was, first of all, yes, the backstory is absurd. The backstory is absurd, and listen, sometimes you just have to suspend your disbelief and just be like, and if sometimes you can't suspend your disbelief, and in this case, you just have to be like, I'm not going to think about it too much and hope it doesn't come up a lot. because that's the deal with this. The other thing that I did not like was the melodramaticness of this past relationship between Batman and Vicky. Sorry, Bruce Wayne and Vicky. In general, this melodramaticness that was surrounding specifically Bruce Wayne. Like, Batman, yes, we need the melodrama, right? Um, Funnily enough, he also had less melodrama, I think. But there was a lot of melodramaticness surrounding Bruce Wayne. And a lot of it specifically was like he had broken up with this woman named Vicky, or more accurately, from what I understood from the comic, she had broken up with him. So, but the way it was written, like, it was literally one of the time where they put in a line that's so melodramatic that you laugh. Anyways, that's all. Hey, it's 8:30ish on March 14th, and I just finished Batman 485. So, going back to the Batman story, and so this was actually kind of like a two-issue storyline. It ended here, though it did set up for a continuation, but I don't think it's going to continue in the next issue of Batman number 486. So I read this right after reading Vengeance of Bane issue 2, which I didn't put in here just because it's not part of this comic storyline. Only Vengeance of Bane issue 1 is, but I was like comparing it to Vengeance of Bane issue 2, and it's an okay comic, but I don't like it as much just because it isn't as good as the Vengeance of Bane run. So there's that, but it is okay. I feel like, I don't know why, seemed Robin was drawn in as an adult in this one, and that's like my only complaint. Everything else was fine. Like, it wasn't like, oh my god, super amazing. Like, I expected pretty much everything that was going to happen, but that's not a bad thing. But yeah, there was nothing that was like, oh my gosh, this is super amazing, but I enjoyed it. I liked it. My only complaint is that Robin was drawn to look like an adult and he isn't. Okay, it is March 15th, and I just finished Batman 486, and oh my gosh, was that delicious. That is exactly, just exactly the kind of storyline I wanted. So basically, this follows the emotional aftermath for Batman after we last saw him, and like after what happened in the previous two comic issues. And it also has Alfred and Tim discussing what they think is going on with him. And it does introduce a new villain, but the villain is really not the important part. It's just what's happening emotionally with Batman. And oh my gosh, it was so well written. One of the funnest things that I had about it, that I thought had about it, was we get Batman's perspective on his emotional state, and we get Alfred's and Tim's perspective of his emotional state. And the thing is, Batman is actually surprisingly cognizant of how bad his emotional state is and how much he should not be doing the things he is doing and how he is doing them because his emotional state is so bad, which doesn't stop him. And then we see Alfred and Tim, who obviously they're not in his head. They don't know what's going on. They can only see, and they can see that things are bad, but they don't know how bad they really are. And that was amazing. Like, them discussing what's going on with him, not knowing how bad things really are, but knowing things are bad and trying to figure out why he's doing this. And then we see him and we see why he's doing this. Great episode. Great comic issue. Hey, it's around 7 on March 16th, and I just finished Batman 487. This was not as good as Batman 486, and I'll tell you why, and that was the plot. It was also the emotional. Like, obviously, nothing could have the emotional impact that Batman 486 had, and if it had tried to go the exact same route as Batman 486 with that emotional impact, it wouldn't have been good because it would have been too much, right? So I do think that they did the emotional part well. However, the plot, there was just, it was just, there was someone who should have been killed, and there was no reason that they should not have been killed in this comic, except for the fact that that's not how the writers wanted the plot to go. Um, and also the writing and also drawings made it seem like that person should have been killed, and they were not. And yes, plot wise, it would not have made sense at all for that person to have been killed, but it also did not make sense that they weren't killed. Okay? like for continuing plot wouldn't have made sense for them to be killed. Like you don't want them to be killed for continuing plot, but within the comic, it wouldn't have made sense for them not to be killed with what was happening. So that was kind of annoying, and that did take down my enjoyment of the comic. But overall, I really enjoyed it for much of the same reasons I enjoyed number 486. Okay, so it is March 17th. I read Batman number 488. This one reintroduces Azrael, and you see that from like the very first panel. And let me tell you, I was nervous knowing how badly the Sword of Azrael run had gone. However, I should have trusted Doug Moench. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but and it was great. Okay, like was it as good as 486 and 487? No. But I really enjoyed it. So this basically is following two parts. We're following Robin training Azrael to be a superhero in Batman kind of superhero, and the Azrael, which is much more into the morally gray zone to even edging into black. And I know Batman is morally gray already. Azrael is more so. Um, and the other part is we're following Batman. And so I actually think that I actually enjoyed less the following Batman part in this. And but following Batman, I mean following his emotional state. I just, well, there were some things I enjoyed about it. It was, there is this thing in Batman comics, and this is a me thing, because I just have to deal with it. But there's this trope that appears in Batman comics where people will see an image, well, will have like basically visions while they're sleeping or while they're meditating, and it will mean something. And I don't like it. I do not like that kind of stuff. I barely, like, even in books where like there's dreams and it's a significant dream and you can tell why it's significant to their life, and it's like it's not a vision or anything. And in this case that was the same way. Like it wasn't like a future vision, it was just significant to his life. That's just not a trope I like, which is why I liked following the Batman part less. I really enjoyed following Robin training Azrael. I mean training montages that are, I love training montages. The opposite. I dislike the trope of dreams that are significant and visions that are significant. I like the trope of training montages, and I love it when they actually show us the training and even explain why they're doing it the way they're doing it, which is exactly what happened in this comic. So, obviously, that part was just written for me. Um, about the drawings, I think they're fine. Like, I do. There was one drawing of Batman, which I don't want to say because it's spoilers, but I'm just going to say I really enjoyed the way that they drew his outfit in that situation. And I, like, it was very evocative of what they wanted to say. And honestly, the vision was also evocative of what they wanted to say, so that's good too. Oh, also, I one fun thing about comics is like you have the drawings like providing more stuff, right? So in a prose book, we would see Azrael being impetuous through through writing his actions. And here they're obviously not going to write us his actions, they're going to show it in the drawings. And when it's action stuff like that, but it's not too complicated. I do not love the fight scenes so far in these comics. I find them very hard to follow, honestly. This comic issue a little easier actually, but in general I find them hard to follow because there's a lot going on in just one panel. But when it's action that is just one or two stuff that's going on, I think it's actually funner in comics than in prose. Okay, so it is March 21st, and the next comic that was up for me was Detective Comics number 654. Now, this is by a different writer and different artists. So, And so we're following kind of a different plot line. Um, we're less emotional. We are following the rise of a villain. And honestly, I love this villain. He doesn't. I'm guessing he's a newer villain because his backstory is not. So who knows? Because Bane is actually a newer villain as well. But yeah, his backstory is actually. It's not that spiritual stuff I was talking about before. I quite like his backstory. And I really like how he is. Hmm, sane enough to be dangerous, but insane enough to be dangerous, if you know what I mean. Still the same day, a few minutes later, and I finished not Batman, sorry, Detective Comics 655. It's odd because these were being published at the same time as the Batman comics I was just reading, but, and And we are following Batman being exhausted, but this comic even is in an earlier stage in the last Batman comic I read, even though it was published in the same month. So I'm glad I wasn't reading them together because that would have been really annoying to me. One thing I forgot to say, I also love how this villain is exactly the kind of person that Batman takes under his wing. Like he's a child whose parents are not good. Not only the child's parents are not good, he has black hair and blue eyes. I absolutely love that. And you can see, I can't give spoilers, but I like the way it affects Batman. And I really like the plot of this comic. It's definitely a fast comic to read. These comics are I'm reading way faster than the Detective Comics one. It's not a bad thing that I was reading those slower, but I definitely was reading them slower. I was like, this is really only 22 pages. Like, uh, it's not about, they're just different. One thing I will say, I really like the art style, but the only thing I don't like, I really, really like the colors. I forgot who the colorist is for this, but oh my gosh, I really like the colors in this. But I do not like the way the eyelashes are drawn. But it's such a tiny thing, and the art in general is so good that I'm like, okay, whatever, let it be that. So I finished Batman number 456, Detective Comics 656, which is a wrap on that storyline, and we're going to go back to Batman in the 400s soon. But so there's a few things I want to say. What I want to say about comics 1 and 2, I want to say about the eyelashes that I wanted to add that another reason I didn't mind them is because, well, I personally didn't like them. It's just because it was an art style, specifically on the eyelashes, that I didn't like. And they were perfectly okay. Another thing I wanted to add is that there's this plot point in the first comic that I found incredibly unrealistic. But at the same time, knowing that these comics are written A, in America, and B, before 9/11, I'm like, maybe it is realistic. I don't know. Like, it just feels like it shouldn't have been that way. Like, there was no way that an army would act in that way, but be trained to act in that way. They should be trained to act in logical ways. But I don't know. I'm debating between of us. It's like it's so unrealistic. I'm annoyed to it's America before 9/11 and they were much more lax and maybe to the point of being super, super foolish. Okay, now back to the comic that I actually just read. So the illustrators changed and they changed the way our main villain looks. Which, like, it's one thing to change the style, it's another thing to totally change how he looks. And I did not enjoy that, and it literally took away a lot of the enjoyment of the comic for me. But overall, it was a good ending to the arc, and it did set up some good continuation for Detective Comics that I now want to see, but that's not in the plan for Prelude to Knightfall, so we'll see what happens with that. March 31st, and I just read Detective Comics number 657. So this one we're continuing the two plot lines of Batman's slash Bruce Wayne's exhaustedness and Azrael's training from the last comic, but they also added another plot line of these mysterious murders. And I found this comic very fun. I enjoyed all parts of it. The only thing I did not enjoy is that they would sometimes do close-ups on the faces, and I really, really did not like how the faces were drawn during those close-ups. Like, the lighting was awfully weird, and the eyes and eyelashes were creepy. March 31st, and I finished Detective Comics number 658, which ends up kind of solving very quickly what happened, what like the mysterious murders they set up in the previous comic, and establishing Azrael as invaluable. So yeah, I obviously enjoyed this more. Like, I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think like it was great. Like, I thought it was just okay because, and I don't think that's a bad thing because this comic is just so obviously a setup comic, and I definitely don't like that the murder thing got solved so quickly. I hope it comes back. But yeah, but I didn't really mind that this was more of a setup for Azrael, but it could have definitely been better. So listen, this Prelude to Knightfall has a lot more comics than I expected, and this video is probably already long. I don't know how long, but it's the end of March, and I started this at like the beginning of March or right before March. So we're going to end it here and call it a part 1, and I'll continue reading Prelude to Knightfall comics in a part 2.